Today is Saturday, December 4th, the traditional date in Mahayana countries of the Buddha's Great Enlightenment is December 8th. And so we're doing our ceremony, our one-day Zazen Kai in honor of the Buddha's Great Enlightenment here from our little rental apartment since our house went through a fire, which is getting worked on and cleaned up. And it's always really very moving. See if Rose is checking on something. It's always very moving to be able to talk about the Buddha's enlightenment. This is what all of our practice springs out of. It's what Zen and all of Buddhist tradition emerges from, the realization of one person and the hard work that he put in to come to a place of satisfaction in terms of what it means to be alive as a human being on this earth, aware of impermanence, aging, sickness, death, and the possibility of something that is not separate from those things, but is beyond them. So today we'll look in our Teisho at the Buddha's Great Enlightenment, and we will continue with that in our ceremony at the end of the Zazen Kai. So the Buddha awakes, touching the earth. Enlightenment is both the goal as well as the ordinary daily beating heart of Zen. Gaining calm and experiencing peaceful sitting is of course good. But if calm were all Siddhartha sought, he'd never have needed to leave home. Like today, 2,500 years ago, billboards proclaiming, "Get your calm on here," were springing up all over town. He saw that what they offered wasn't enough. Having personally experienced the terrors of impermanence, seen with his own eyes the insubstantiality of every person and thing, a fire was lit in his mind, heart, and gut. And after that, he had to keep going. This is not just a deeply Buddhist, but a universal impulse, a deeply ancient desire to go beyond habitual limits, beyond all the conditions we naively call the world. James Stevens, in one of my favorite old books, Irish Fairy Tales, touches on it in a quaint and earthy way when he wrote, "If you keep on driving a pig or a story, they will at last get to where you wish them to go. And the man who keeps putting one foot in front of the other will leave his home behind and will come at last to the sea and the end of the world." If you keep on driving a pig or a story or a practice, they will at last get to where you wish them to go. And the person that keeps putting one foot in front of the other will leave their home behind and come at last to the sea and the end of the world. The end of the world, what does it mean? Surely he's not talking about standing at a cliff's edge looking down at the surge and tumult of the sea. This ending of the world takes place right where we are. It could be when you're talking on the phone. Hold on one second. Yeah. When you're talking on the phone, or sitting in the Zendo, or cooking a meal, or walking the dog, the Buddha left his ancient palatial home of the habitual unconscious mind and kept going on and on into unknown forests and mountains until he came to the end of the arising of all that old and suffering world. What did he see? Tradition says it was a morning star. How appropriate. Vastness, space, a bit of light. But why, at that inexpressible moment, did he suddenly exclaim, "Wonder of wonders"? This question pierces to the heart of it, and it is itself a deep encouragement, itself a Dharma treasure, an expressive reminder connecting us with our own nature and our own innate, deepest, and as yet unfulfilled desire to fully awake. Wherever we are, whatever we may have realized or not realized, we too can, like the Buddha, keep going. The essence, as has been said, of genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. We do the work, then we keep doing the work. Kensho, intimately touching the vast, empty, pure, infinite, eternal ground of mind of what simply and actually is not the end of our road, but rather its real beginning. You open a long forgotten door, walk through it, and suddenly exclaim, "Oh, right, here's the real ground that's been under my feet all along." And then you can continue your journey with more confidence in the fact that you're on the right and the solid road. In many of his past life Jataka tales, the Bodhisattva, or Buddha-to-be, relates how he already saw into the reality of selflessness, the identity of form and emptiness, and actually awoke to one degree or another to original non-dual true nature. But it wasn't yet complete. It faded or leaked, became entangled with ancient, habitually self-centered ways. So while these were milestone moments, they were not yet the full realization of original Buddhahood, or we might say complete access to our own dormant powers of wisdom, compassion, and virtue. Still feeling incomplete, no matter how mature or how insightful he became, the Bodhisattva kept returning to practice again and again. There was always more to wake to. Buddhist tradition says that wherever the Bodhisattva, the one destined to become the Buddha of our world cycle, was born, no matter in what form or station of life, no matter what challenging or distracting issues he faced, he always chose to go further, over the next hill, beyond the next river, through the next dark forest, onward, further was his nature as it is ours, which is why the Tao is called the way or path. Practice realization is not static, but a road that leads on endlessly. The Zen saying goes, even Shakyamuni is only halfway there, forming a stunning pointer to just how endlessness might be. Clearly, wherever we now are, we can also certainly go further. There is no reason for not continuing to practice as best we can. Circumstances change, circumstances challenge us, and this will always happen. It will continue to arise. The key is continuing to recognize that we have vowed to do something fundamental, to awake to the nature that is vast, empty, pure, yet full of infinite potential for wisdom and compassion. This vow helps us to turn the challenges we face into allies that help us mature. Roshi Kapleau used to say that challenges and obstacles are like hurdles for a runner. They actually help the runner mobilize his or her deepest energy so they run even faster. The foundation for actualizing such a path in life lies not in frenetic bursts of energy, but rather in steady, ongoing practice. It's like paddling a canoe. Digging in our paddle at a steady pace, our boat moves forward. But if we stop, then we really have to dig in and paddle hard, simply to overcome our own loss of momentum. Zen Buddhism particularly reveres the story of the historical Buddha's enlightenment because it so dramatically reveals our own potential, even as it reveals the work, the persistent, determined, dedicated work that underlies all milestone experiences. Paradoxically, when milestones open up, we are astonished and can only exclaim, how simple, how clear, it was there all along, how wonderful. but it only came from all the effort we put in when it wasn't clear and it seems even impossible. But it isn't just that things get progressively better. Roshi Kapleau also used to say we are always evolving and devolving according to causes and conditions. So even after lifetimes of sustained effort, in the final hours of his ongoing exertions, the ex-prince Siddhartha, the Buddha about to be, had a Christ on the cross moment, realizing that his terribly willful starvation and asceticism had not clarified a thing, but only left him in a dark and useless place. And then he lets it go. He doesn't sit there beating himself up about the mistakes he made. Right then and there, realizing his error, he does an about-face and starts taking proper nourishment. I assume you all know the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, which came from 6 years of very determined effort through tremendous difficulty. And at one of those points in his practice, he decided that the old ancient Indian path of asceticism would be the way to master the self and realize enlightenment. And he put upon himself the worst ascetic practices, the most terrible you can imagine, until basically he was a skeleton held together with sinews and veins, hardly a living man, and near death, which is when he remembered something from childhood, where he had a deep experience as a child of feeling connected with everything. And he realized if it didn't come from beating himself up or from starving himself, then the asceticism would not be the correct path. And he started eating again. This was just before he sat before the Bodhi tree. We'll get into that this afternoon in the ceremony when we'll go through our traditional reading of the Buddha's enlightenment. But just so that you know, if that story wasn't clear to you, what I was talking about just there. So even though the ex-prince sat and sat, in the end, simply sitting quietly wasn't enough. There was a trigger to his realization. It didn't just come from looking within. Looking within, we might say, is the groundwork, the precondition, the tilling of the soil, the context, but not the awakening. It could have been a word, a sound, anything really, for the mind was ripe, empty of all fixed notions, assumptions, preconditioned limits. In his case, he happened to glance up after a long night of focused zazen and saw the morning star, Venus, the morning star, just beginning to glimmer. And suddenly, aha, gone, entirely gone. A morning star sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Star, just star, no mind, no dust, just star. But even before that, he wasn't just squatting there like a frog. He was fully absorbed in this breath. At the same time, alert as a cat sitting before a mouse hole. Then when Mara challenged him, he didn't get tangled up in it, but he didn't ignore it either. Now, Mara, again, if you aren't really familiar with the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, is the term for typically, popularly, it's the Buddhist devil. But really, Mara is a distractor, all those things that distract us from being really present. Obstacles can distract us, but so can, all kinds of things. Self-concern can distract us from being really present in our life. Distracting us from paying attention to this breath, from being really present in this moment as a fully awake human being. So Mara is that challenging, distracting potential of our own mind. So when Mara challenged the Buddha sitting there under the Bodhi tree, he didn't get entangled in the challenge, but he didn't ignore it either. And when situations arise in our lives, we can't go off and sit until they're gone. We need to respond, to act, but it need not be a big deal. In fact, it would be wise not to make it, whatever it is, a big deal. The Buddha simply touched the earth and asked the earth to witness for him. He didn't try to muster up a list of excellent reasons to use to out-argue Mara and prove his worth. He did what was exactly right and also just enough. Now, looking at the story of the Buddha's life, I mean, that's a wonderful model, the Buddha's enlightenment, rather. That's a wonderful model for how to respond to distractions and challenges. Aiken Roshi used to say things like, if you get really caught up in things while you're sitting, all the things that need doing, or the rearranging of the furniture in your living room, or whatever it is that your mind is getting caught up in, you can just basically say to this Mara, hey, catch you later, I'm doing Zazen now. And if the thought is important, it'll come back to you when you need it. I've recommended, and you'll find this in the 3 pillars of Zen, if you're sitting alone, as most of us tend to be these days, keep a notepad by you, and if a really valuable idea or insight comes up, jot it down and go immediately back to Zazen. Then when your 25 minutes are done, you can look at what you wrote and see if it's important, but you won't be sitting there thinking, I got to remember that, I got to remember that. No, don't get caught up. Do what's just enough and don't make a big deal about it. So looking at the story of the Buddha's life, there's truth too in that final obstacle, which is what he's faced with Mara, is self-doubt. Mara says to him, are you really worthy of coming to enlightenment? Come on, look at you. You're a young ex-prince. How could you be ready? Sages have tried. All kinds of people have tried. You know, you've got the basic equipment, but, you know, take it easy, relax. It's, you know, in a sense, self-doubt is what all obstacles come down to. Yasutani Roshi said, if it wasn't for some form of not giving ourselves fully to the inquiry, holding back self-absorbed and self-protective doubting in a not useful way, we'd all have been fully enlightened ages ago. Which also suggests that each challenge we face offers us an opportunity, a way for us to work on ourselves, see into our own hidden shortcomings, gain greater skill and confidence in being ourselves just as we are. And so every obstacle can help us mature further. Every challenge can help us mature further. It's at such times too that is times of greatest stress that the precepts reveal their worth, become deeply valuable and practical, no longer simply theoretical. It's when we're really put to the test, when the rubber meets the road, that we find out how valuable both practice and awareness of the precepts can be in terms of our living in the best possible way through whatever difficulties we may be facing. Yet self-doubt is so pervasive that even when we're passed on an initial koan, we can still fall into self-doubt. What? Really? That's it? We may think, as long-standing habits of mind return. Yet this too need not be an obstacle. We can simply accept it as another Dharma gate we've vowed to wake to. Listen, I know a Zen teacher who long ago, after being passed on Mu, then put himself back on Mu for another 3 years. And at that time, he was doing 7-day sesshin almost every, you know, a lot of them all through the year. And he put himself back on Mu through all those sesshin for another 3 years before finally accepting what he already had. That was pretty amazing self-doubt and also a great deal of integrity. He didn't care how dumb he looked. He didn't want to go, oh, I've been passed on Mu, you know. It was like, no, I'm not satisfied yet. I was really impressed to hear that. The teacher himself told me this story. It was very humble of them, and I thought it showed a great deal of integrity. I don't know. I don't know if I could have done that. I really don't. So I thought that was very, very honest. Many Zen teachers, when first sanctioned, go through several years of feeling like frauds even while they're teaching and guiding others well. In other words, we're all in the same boat, all members of the same one nose, two eyes society. Legend says that even after his great enlightenment, the Buddha doubted that what he'd realized could even be taught. It was too simple, too immediate, too clear. Either you saw it or you didn't. You already had it. You couldn't get it. Either you saw it or you didn't. Besides, in reality, from the perspective of his newly opened eye, there weren't any others to teach. It wasn't until, legend says, the radiant, long-lived God stepped in again, as they had when initially motivating him to leave home, when they took the form of the old person, the sick person, the dead person, and the home leaver, to remind him of his own ancient vows and to get him going. And the gods came to him again and assured him that there were many people with very little dust in their eyes who were ready for his Dharma. And only then did he begin teaching. So he knew self-doubt, or doubt in any case, even after his great realization. This too, I think, is a wonderful expression of myth, telling us something very real about ourselves, not over-glorifying anything. Which is one of the reasons I found Buddhist tradition so trustworthy, because it told us the truth about our own nature. There's a lovely touch of myth in the story too, as you'll see in the ceremony this afternoon, when the Naga king, Nagas are like cobras, Kala Nagaraja, the black snake king, raises his ancient head and linear time simply falls away. And for an instant, we're in the inconceivability of timelessness. That's a beautiful kind of mythic aspect to the story. The Nagas live in streams and rivers and oceans and are great wisdom holders. And here's the Naga king. And the Buddha, the story is the Buddha tossed his begging bowl onto the stream saying, if today is the day of my enlightenment, may this bowl float upstream, that is against the current. And it goes upstream and then comes to the whirlpool where Kala Nagaraja lives and goes down, down, down into the whirlpool and then clink, lands against a whole row of identical bowls. So the myth here is telling us again something real and true. First of all, tossing the bowl on the stream and having it go upstream against the current tells us about our Zazen practice. You're not going along with the stream. You're going up against the stream. The image in Zen is the carp leaping up against the flow of the waterfall to become the dragon that it's always been. So it's right there in the story of the Buddha's enlightenment. It could sound like a very esoteric kind of literalization, but what it's saying is, we have to do the same thing. If we mean to awake, we have to go up against the stream of thoughts, concepts, ideas, all the things we cling to in our minds in actualizing moment to moment practice realization. It's right there in the myth. And that little clink of the bowl against a long row of identical bowls that have ended up in Kala Nagaraja's den there, palace under the river, is telling us that many, many, many other people have walked this road to its conclusion through endless time, that we're not alone, that this path has been there for a long, long time, and many people have come to full realization by doing the same work and dealing with the same difficulties and the same doubts and the same obstacles and the same challenges that we all face right now. So there's encouragement in this story that in some senses seem, whoa, that's kind of wild. But in other ways, it's very down to earth and it's saying very clear things. So the legend of the Buddha's enlightenment is part of the classical canon, but it's also an encouragement to each one of us in our own practice in life right now. It's not way out there. It's saying very direct and clear things. Buddhist tradition says that we all have the nature of Buddha, have exactly the same vast, empty nature of endlessly creative and compassionate potential as Shakyamuni and all previous and future Buddhas. From the first, we are each fully and equally endowed with limitless wisdom and virtue. And because it is already who we are, if we practice, if we make sincere efforts, we too can, to one degree or another, awake to our own original mind. Original in the sense of before it's conditioned, the mind that sees color, that hears sounds, that thinks thoughts, before it's conditioned to all the limitations of our education and upbringing. What is this mind itself? It's much vaster than we may think. In fact, modern science is agreeing, now that I think about it, saying that the brain does not create reality. The brain is a reducing valve to slow down our intake of reality so we can function easily enough with it. The brain serves as a reducing valve. So what is the mind itself? How much more vast might our minds be than we're used to handling? And through steady ongoing practice, we begin to get a sense of being able to handle more and more of awareness. That is, we become conscious of what we've been unconscious of. So, we will not simply float into this realization, however, and somehow begin magically living from it. As the great iconoclastic Japanese Zen master Ikkyu, whose dates are 1394 to 1481, said, when was Columbus? 1492. So Ikkyu died even before Columbus, and he was already well ahead of Columbus in so many ways. He said, there is no natural Shakyamuni. In other words, though we already are it, we won't realize it without working at it. It's a great paradox. If we already are it, why must we work so hard to realize what we already are? This is the question that bugged young Dogen and gave him no peace. If, as the Buddha proclaimed, Dogen thought, this is my interpretation of it, if as the Buddha proclaimed upon his great realization, all beings are Buddha, why did all the sages of the past have to sweat blood to know it? That was his question. Why indeed? Dogen's lack of peace forged his resolve, and in the end led him to great peace. You can't arrive at peace without doing the work of recognizing your unpeace. That'd be like trying to jump over all your problems to some wonderful place. No, you have to do the work and go through it. Go through it all. Enlightenment, in fact, isn't a thing we can get, except in the sense of, oh, I get it. If anything, it comes from losing, not gaining. Losing all the ancient, interior, self-centered stuff that cuts us off, leaving us alone and isolated. With that wonderful failure, that liberating loss, we uncover our original unblemished intimacy with sun, moon, stars, wind, rain, snow, clouds, trash, bugs, cats, rivers, mountain, trees, people, joy and sorrow. We do not gain it because it has never been lost. Like the ground, which the Buddha touched upon his just before his great enlightenment. It has always been here. We just haven't had the steadiness to notice. And it's not that I become intimate with everything. Keizan Jokin, in the opening of the Denkoroku, Transmission of the Light, writes, Shakyamuni Buddha saw the morning star and was enlightened. And he said, I and the great earth and beings simultaneously attained the way. Then in his Teisho on this, Keizan Jokin wrote, the so-called I is not Shakyamuni Buddha, and Shakyamuni Buddha also comes from this I. Shakyamuni Buddha also comes from this I. Zen has us ask, okay, if I am this enlightened nature, where is it? And why don't I know it? In our Zazen, we can at last bore into such questions like a thirsty person drilling for water, a sonar survey, the life of the Buddha, the Jatakas, sutras, Zen teachings, the life stories of our Zen ancestors, men and women, lay and ordained, shows us that all the water we will ever need is already right there beneath our feet. Our daily Zazen and our own life experience begins to confirm our faith in this. And so we keep at it. We sit and we sit. We come to Sesshin, to Zazankai, Doksan, and Teisho, to services and ceremonies. We examine precepts in relation to our lives. We experience this breath, count this breath, sit fully, read sutras, return to our koan, point after point. In these ways, we actualize our original vow, the vow of unconditioned mind itself and of all maturing beings or bodhisattvas to realize the ancient way for the benefit of all. The wisdom that is compassion, the compassion that is no other than wisdom, comes down to continuous practice. Easy to say, but what is it? I would say that the essence of continuous practice is the lessening of an unconscious and habitual identification with self-centeredness. This is the core of active Zazen. It is not a matter of pushing the self away or of suppressing or ignoring it, all of which only serves to reify our sense of an isolated, at-risk self. It comes from attending to this very self as it arises in all its confusion, without flinching, without evading, seeing it so very clearly that we ultimately find it, wonder of wonders, absolutely transparent and empty, void. The Bodhisattva of compassion from the depths of prajna, wisdom, saw the emptiness of all five skandhas and sundered the bonds that create suffering. To paraphrase Dogen, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to realize intimacy with all things. This selflessly intimate practice continues endlessly. So practice is not cast aside with realization. Practice is realization in action, whether we know it yet or not. Practice continues after realization, after deep realization, but it is no longer forced. Instead, it is simply who we are. The Buddha, the ex-prince, touched the earth after lifetimes of such practice, as the Jatakas show. For many of us, too, will not be until years into ongoing practice, after various minor milestones, relatively minor, that the gateless gate really swings open and we personally know without a doubt. Yet even this, we come to see, is simply another beginning, another step, not the end of the road. The Buddha's own realization points the way. It is said to have been so total and complete, every level of character and mind fully realized, fully functioning, because of the immensely dedicated work that led up to it. In substance, while every kensho, the small kind, we're likely to realize, and the Buddha's own great enlightenment are the same, but in content, they are vastly different. Buddhist mythos says that in this world age, no one experienced more deeply than Shakyamuni, because no one had worked so hard or for so long to prepare for it. He touched not just the ground, but the bottomless bottom and the soaring heights. Comparing our realization of practice, our practice of realization to his, is like comparing the finger painting of a kindergartner to a work by a Rembrandt or Picasso. The substance, of course, is the same. Both are paintings, but the degree of conscious realization is vastly different. Yet, we must all begin somewhere. And for the kindergartner, that finger painting will be just as meaningful as Rembrandt's work was for him. The Buddhist story, his home leaving, his forest path exertions, his abandonment by his ascetic disciples, and his solitary confrontation with Mara, the primordial force of his own habitual ignorance, completes his many lifetime Jataka path. Touching the earth, he gets up and walks on, transcending the final temptation to sit forever at ease in his own long-sought, hard-won pavilion of complete enjoyment, freedom, wisdom, and peace. Instead, he devotes his next 50 years of life to walking the dusty roads of India, teaching those who, while in reality as complete and whole as he, just don't yet know it. He goes back into the seeming chaos of the 10,000 things, at peace with it all, a half smile on his lips. Now, just prior to the moment of enlightenment, after the Buddha Dabi's 6 years of exhaustive effort and endless kalpas of Jataka practice, exertions, going the limit, trying and trying with all he had, drawing on the power of his own countless efforts, failures, and victories, Mara, the Buddhist tempter or distractor, the inner voice of ego, takes off his masks and appears quite nakedly. Mara is so worried, he now makes a desperate last-ditch effort to turn the once sheltered, now deeply determined ex-prince from the ultimate goal by pulling out his ace in the hole, self-doubt. What? I have this nature? It's me? I can realize it? Really? Self-doubt convinces us to cling to a fixed belief in the solidity of a forever separate, winning, losing, interior self, a self that can be saved, a self that can be enlightened. This self-doubt glues us to the stickiness of what is only provisionally real. Obstacles and challenges can do this too. If we let them, we can get caught up and defensive, feel we must overcome what confronts us or retreat from it. This is only natural. Yet if we pay attention and practice into the challenge, into the stress, something shifts. Sometimes deepening practice itself elicits the challenge. So as the Buddha's practice deepens, Mara appears, and confronting the Buddha to be asked, how could you, a sheltered ex-prince, be worthy of the supreme goal of perfect enlightenment? Better men and women than you have tried and failed. You're young and a beginner. Give it time. You've got the basic ability. But now, no way. Back off. Take it slow. This is reasonable advice. Reasonable as all get out. Devilishly reasonable. Take it easy, be careful, go slow, be steady, prepare, reduce attachments and ego concerns, be humble, don't be hasty. Maras or distractors are said to exist throughout the endless worlds. The good news is that Maras may actually be, get this, advanced bodhisattvas. Vimalakirti Sutra takes this position, whose challenges to us are really skillful means or upaya meant to help us mature. How? By forcing us to dig in, to deepen our determination, to clarify our understanding. None of these things come easily. The challenges we face in life can help us to mature. So at this crucial juncture with worlds hanging in the balance, Mara comes to check out the ex-prince Siddhartha and see if he is ready to go on or not. Siddhartha is ready. He doesn't even waste breath arguing with the habit voice of his own separateness, his own deep unconscious predilection toward self-centeredness. Nor does he try to put together a reasonable counter-argument. To enter the fray is to have already lost. Ready? Not ready? A self that gains? A self that loses? A self that has it? A self that doesn't have it? He doesn't get sucked into Mara's metaphor at all. Instead, he probably smiled, maybe even shook his head in pity for poor old Mara, then reached down and touched the earth and let the earth, the humble, always present, endlessly trod upon earth, be his witness. And the earth, steady witness to all activities, all lives, including the Buddha's own past ones, replied with its thousands of living voices speaking as one. He is worthy. Interbeing, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's felicitous term, awakes, and Mara is overwhelmed, gives up, and turns away. Jataka tales are the record of the Buddha's own practice history. It is a particularly long history and said to go back eons, even world ages, big bangs. According to Buddhist tradition, we too have our own Jataka history. Things happened that made us who we are. We stumbled, scratched our knees, got up, let the wound scab over, and tried again. We met with joys and sorrows. Perhaps our history might also extend back through ages. Where, after all, does the path of causation that unfolds as each plant, bug, animal, bird, as us, begin? Bodhidharma's one-mind precept states self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. Our nature, the nature that right now hears this Tesha, feels sensations, feels an itch, thinks thoughts, the nature that gets hungry and eats, gets tired and sleeps, is wondrous. A cut bleeds, then heals. An impossible burger becomes a thought, a symphony, a heartbeat, a fiber of muscle. Inconceivably wondrous self-nature is who we are. Like the ground beneath us, it has always been here. At his moment of final challenge, the Buddha touched the earth, the humble ground beneath him. He didn't reach up for the sky or beg for help from above. He didn't fall for Mara's metaphor and try to win the debate or out-argue the distractor. He touched the always present, selfless, sat on, trod on ground and asked the earth to testify to what she'd seen. Her humbly solid response confirms him, overwhelming all doubts, even self-doubt. What builds solid ground beneath us is the work we do now with this breath, not the past one, not the next one. This is where we touch ground. This is where we make the effort real. Roshi Kapleau used to say, if you don't let the Dharma down, the Dharma will never let you down, and that no sincere effort is ever wasted. What makes this such a lovely story is that it's not simply ancient history, It's our story too. This moment is part of the ongoing Jataka series of the unfully realized Buddhas we each are. Essential nature, mind itself, the ground beneath us, is always here. Past lives, past thoughts, decisions, and events lead to this present one in which we sit, walk, stand, speak, eat, work, worry, create, pick our noses. From day's end, we say goodnight and lie down on the ground of our nature, the ground we practice from, have always been standing on, whether we know it or not. It is always there, ready to testify for us if we ask it. Our fundamental vow as human beings is to know ourselves. This is why we practice. Not to become special thises or that's, but to know who or what we actually, truly, already are. Zen Master Dogen said, when the self advances to confirm the 10,000 things, it is called delusion. When the 10,000 things advance and confirm the self, it is intimacy or enlightenment. The 10,000 things are birds, bugs, clouds, mountains, rivers, people, animals, traffic sounds, cell phones, raindrops, pebbles, clumps of earth, bright morning stars. Ordinary things confirm us, tell us, indeed make us who we are every day. In reality, there is no barrier between us and a single thing. That enlightenment is intimacy, is not cleverness. It is simply the truth. Because this is so, each of us has the full potential to awake to it. Touching the earth is always possible because real ground is never far away, and neither is a star. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.